We just finished the first blessing of the Amidah. Now this is the introduction to the second bracha. Ato Gibor Le'olam Hashem. You are powerful forever. And the appellation for God here is Adni, master. We refer to God as Gadol, great, Nora, awesome. But in this context, at this moment, we're referring to God with the adjective of Gibor. He is Gibor. And Gibor is synonymous with mastership. He is the master. Master indicates power. He's the powerful one. We could say, Ato Gibor Adni. You are powerful master. What is Ato Gibor Le'olam? You are powerful forever, master. Talmud tells us that one says a bracha, a blessing, if one just says Melech, and you leave out Olam, Ha'olam, king of the universe, you just refer to God as king. God Almighty, king, but you don't refer to him as king of the universe, it's not a valid blessing. He has to be identified as universe. Because universe means he is the king of the universe, the all-encompassing king. As we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Mamlich Melochim v'lo HaMelucha. God coronates kings, but who is the king? He's the king himself. Ato Gibor L'olam Adni. You are powerful forever, the master. We're not talking about a master. You know, we read about Yamach Shmo v'Zichro, Titus, who destroyed the second Beis Hamikdash, second temple. He was the Caesar of the Roman Empire. And what he did, it says when he went into the Holy of Holies, the first thing he did, he took a spear and he pierced the curtain that separates between the Holy and the Holy of Holies. And God performed a miracle that when he put the spear through that curtain, blood ran from the curtain. So he said, the words of the Talmud is, he took his own life, because God forbid, we're not going to say he took God, but he believed he had killed the Jewish God. And that the blood was hemorrhaging from the curtain was an indication of his prowess, his power. He believed he'd be the one. He is the all-powerful. He is the invincible one. He beat the God of the Jews. So what happened? Talmud tells us he took the curtain which separated the Holy of Holies and the Holies, took all the vessels of the temple. He put them into this curtain like a container. He wrapped them. And he took it and put it on a boat, taking it back to Rome. This is the spoils of the conquest of the Jews, the vessels of the Holy of Holies, together with the other vessels. The ark was not, because the ark was hidden away at the end of the first temple period. As he gets into the boat and they enter into the ocean, gale winds start blowing and the boat's about to sink. The boat's about to be destroyed. So God, he raises his eyes to God. He says, sure, just as you destroyed Pharaoh through water, your power is only on the water. Come onto dry land, I'll take you on single-handedly. This is the level of brazenness, arrogance, insolence that this man speaks to God. A heavenly voice calls out, the smallest insect on dry land will take you down. As he steps on dry land, a tiny flea enters his nostril, and enters into his brain, and gnaws away at his brain for years. Doesn't say how long, for extent. He suffered tremendously. The pain was intolerable until finally he died from this. But his last request was that after he dies, he should be cremated and his ashes should be spread over the 7 seas. So the Jewish God should not be able to locate him. You understand what's going on over here? The level of arrogance. The tiny flea enters his nose, up his nostril, into his brain, gnaws away at his brain until he finally dies. This is when they opened his skull. They found a bird that its beak was made of bronze. Its feet were made of iron. It was like a monstrous looking bird. This little flea developed into that from gnawing away at his brain. And afterwards, he says, make sure to incinerate me, cremate me, and spread me over the 7 seas of the world so the Jewish God should not be able to locate me. So the Talmud tells us every day of the year till today, God gathers the ashes together, recreates him, he's recremated, and every day they spread his ashes over the 7 seas. And this repeats itself day in and day out since that event, since then. And his soul suffers in hell forever until eventually he's going to the oblivion, which hasn't happened yet. This is the final fate of Titus. He was a master. Rome ruled the world. Master. He thought he's master even after he dies. And he's able to usurp and evade the Jewish God. Lahavdil. Ato Gibor Lolom. Adni. You are powerful forever because you are the master. You, Olam, you are the master of the universe. You master of the universe means not today, yesterday, or only tomorrow. It's a continuum from the beginning for all eternity. This is how we identify God. But now at this moment, it's within the context of power. Because when we speak about resurrection, to be able to bring a person after he decomposes, after he dies, after the soul departs from the body, back to life, recreating him, which is equivalent of recreation of a world, that's power. That's Gibor. That's Gvura. But more than everything, what's power? It's not what you're able to do. Rav Loshia. When it comes to salvation, with abundance, he comes to bring about salvation. There's no moment which it's not possible for God to address that moment and rectify it and rehabilitate it and bring it back to where he wants it to be. Because he's Rav Loshia. He's magnanimous when it comes to Loshia, when it comes to salvation. We're identifying Mechayim Mesim Atov. You are the one who resurrects the dead. It doesn't Mechayim Mesim Atov. You are the one. Resurrecting the dead is the equivalent of creation. It's almost a border on the ex nihilo. To recreate the body and then reinfuse the body with the original soul. But what is resurrection? It's just not recreating the body, if you infuse the soul. When the body is resurrected, as we said, based on what the Ramchal explains, Rabbi Lutzato, that the reason why every human being who ever lived has to die and decompose and then be resurrected, because the original evil of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which is unadulterated, the most lethal form, evil on the spiritual level, the reason why man can't live forever, regardless how pure he is, even Moshe Rabbeinu, with that physical body, is because that evil hasn't been expunged from that physicality. It's so embedded, and that cannot be eternal. That cannot have a relation with God. And that's where the person dies, only the soul ascends. The body goes into the ground and decomposes. And even the person who doesn't decompose in the ground, as Moshe Rabbeinu, as the tribes, as the patriarchs, a moment before resurrection, everything is converted back to dust, then immediately resurrected. Because you cannot continue in that stage with that original body, because that body itself contains, regardless how much you've expunged it, it still has traces of that evil. So when the body is resurrected and recreated, it's only of the purest matter without that evil being part and parcel of that body. That's Gibor, that's Gvura. God is Mechayim Mesim Ato. You are the one, you're the only one who can resurrect the dead, no one else. So this is another feature of God. Not as only is God a creator, but God is also Mechayim Mesim Ato. We're depicting him as the resurrector of the dead. And what is resurrection of the dead? Rav Loshia. That takes tremendous amount of salvation to do that. Rav Loshia. Because we'll see in a moment that before a person lives, is born into existence, he's born into existence with a pure soul and pure body. Due to one's challenges in life, the choices we make, as the Talmud tells us, at two locations, everything's predestined except fear of God. Every pronouncement is made on that droplet of semen before conception. Wise, foolish, strong, weak, wealthy, poor, and every conceivable pronouncement. But tzaddik v'rosha, whether he will be devoutly righteous or evil, that pronouncement is not made. Because everything's predestined except fear of heaven. So initially, when a person comes into this existence, his choice has no relevance to his being. He's first entering into existence. But after a person has been here, and at the end of his life, he's made endless choices, and there is a record of that person's life, to be worthy to be brought back, it's not so simple. Those who are worthy to be brought back, you can count them on one hand. But most people who, so to say, relatively speaking, make the grade are resurrected. Why? That's Rav Loshia. Although we're not perfect, but we have a semblance of that, but to do that, it's only because God, with abundance, is able to bring about salvation. As we're going to see, continuing in this particular bracha of the second blessing, which is known as the resurrection. It begins with God depicting him as the one who brings the dead back to life, and it concludes, Baruch Ato Hashem, Mechayim Mesim. Blessed art you, God, who resurrects the dead. That's the conclusion of the blessing. But that's power. What level of power? Eternal power. And therefore the appellation here is master. At what level is he master? Is he Adni? On an eternal level. Titus, whatever he was in his time, or the Nebuchadnezzar, Babylonian emperor, the Talmud tells us, Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian emperor who destroyed the first temple, was so evil that when he went to Gehenna, the people in Gehenna, his compatriots, his constituents, they said, we thought when we went to hell, we escaped from you. All of a sudden now you're coming to Gehenna with us. They don't know where to run to. This is how evil he was. What kind of tyrant he was. The way he destroyed those people's lives. They ruled the world supreme at that moment. Afterwards, they go into the dustbins of history. You know, we bring on Sukkot, which is the festival, which follows Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. On Sukkot, there are 70 bulls oxen that are brought. And every day it starts at a higher number, and every day there's a lesser number. Until the seventh day is the least amount of bulls that are brought. The 70 oxen correspond to the 70 root nations of the world. And what is the significance of the numbers decreasing? Because over time, they're all going to be destroyed. All these mighty civilizations, all these powers, the 70 root nations, the diminishment, the lesser number every day is an indication, the decline. All these nations are going to decline into the oblivion. On Shmini Atzeres, which is the 8th day, which follows Sukkot, which is an adjunct to Sukkot, there's only one bull brought. That represents the Jewish people. This is Melech Mashiach. Ato echad v'shimcha echad. You won your name. Umikamchi shel goy echad boretz. There's only one nation that reflects God's unity, and that's the Jewish people. So God's gvura, God's power, God's invincible control is Olam, Adni, master. And how does he express that mastership? By resurrecting, that indicates his unlimited amount of ability to bring about the ultimate salvation. Because no other power could bring about this salvation. You know, there's an expression, what's the value of history? You're supposed to learn from history. That's the only value of history. You know, they have all these archaeological digs. And just recently, there was an article on King Tut. King Tut, all the treasures and what he was, and wasn't important for the world to know. Or Roman, their prowess, their invincible presence. You know, it's important for us to know, for us, especially as Jews. These people ruled the world supreme. Power, opulence, wealth, one of a kind. Where are they? When we read about their power and their level of what they represented, paganism, they deified themselves. Where are they all today? The dustbins of history. There used to be an expression, it was an earthy expression. He bit the dust. You know, in the old Westerns, he bit the dust. You know, this man was the head honcho in a Western town. And then he went into, you know, high noon, 2 minutes later, he was head honcho until a month later, he's no longer head honcho. He bit the dust. All these monarchs, all these so-called invincible people, all these people deified themselves. Whether it's Pharaoh, King Tut, Caesar, all of them. Where are they? Where's the power? Lahavdil. Ato Gibor Leolam Adni. You, God, you are powerful eternally. You are that master. You resurrect the dead, which is an impossibility for any other power to do. And even that, it's because you're Rav Loshia. Because if you go basically just on justice alone, nobody would be resurrected. But because you have that ability, because you control and you dictate, you make that determination, you're able to bring about that result of resurrection. That's the understanding. You know, the Navi says, what is the world to come? What is it? I mean, there are allusions to it, what it is. In the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos, that even for one mitzvah, there's not enough time and reward in material context to be able to reward a person for one mitzvah. So if you have multiple accomplishments in the spiritual realm at Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. One word of Torah is equivalent to all the mitzvahs combined. So definitely, you can live from the beginning of existence till the end of existence and encapsulate it into one moment. It's not the equivalent of a whiff of the world to come. I mean, could you even fathom what that is? It's not fathomable. And the Navi says, Ayin lo rosa Elokim zu lo secha. The only one who knows what the world to come is Elokim zu, only you, God. Nobody else knows. In the physical existence, what do we experience? Even though we know we have a soul, and a person feels spiritualized, and you feel elated, and you feel connected to God, and God gives you certain senses which has relevance to spiritual nerve endings. But whatever that is, the word infinitesimal is too much to say compared to the world to come, what that reality is. The world to come is having a relation with God, who's the infinite, eternal being, who's the creator, who's absolute in every sense of what absolute means, in the positive, who's the source of all goodness. So when God resurrects us, and we should all merit that and be at an advanced level during that time, the body is a beneficiary of its lifetime's accomplishments, as the soul is before resurrection. The soul at this moment is in the soul world, basking God's radiance. At whatever level it succeeded in the physical life, qualitatively speaking, quantitatively, whatever it did good, whatever good choices it made. But the body, because it possesses that evil of the tree of knowledge, it can't go to the soul world. It can't be there. Because since it represents evil, it can't have any association with God. Only once it's purged, expunged, extracted, and the matter of the body is recreated, then the soul body is able to cleave to God, and the body also is able to experience whatever that experience is in the spiritual realm. That's Rav Loshia. But who's perfect enough to have that relationship? Rav Loshia. It's very interesting. There's a law. You know, when a person sins, the soul is not tainted. Rav Chaim Volozher cites the Zohar that when we sin, I mean, the soul is, but basically the soul pretty much remains intact. The body is the component of the human being that participates in the sin. Person steals, person injures, person violates the Shabbos. All transgressions, infractions take place through a physical action. Even the thought process. It's the brain activity in the brain. The law is that the material that's used for the mantle on the Sefer Torah, when it becomes worn because it accommodates the Sefer Torah, it has to be buried. It assumes a level of sanctity which has a semblance of the Torah because it was associated and it was the covering for the Torah. What about a person wants to use that material for something else, something of a lesser level of sanctity? You want to use that mantle if you have prophets in scroll form. The prophets, although they're holy, it doesn't have the level of holiness of the Sefer Torah. So you cannot use the material of the mantle for what? For the cover a prophet, the prophet scroll. And you're not permitted to use the cover of a prophet scroll to cover scripture, like a Megillah. Because the innate sanctity of a Megillah is not at the level of a prophet, of the scroll of a prophet. But if you want to elevate it, you want to go advance the Kedusha, the sanctity, take the material that you used for the scroll of a prophet for Sefer Torah, that you can. because that's called advancing. That's advancing the sanctity. That's not diminishing the sanctity. But what about to take material that was used not in a neutral setting, something which is okay, but it's inappropriate? For instance, you want to take the material of a pair of pants that somebody wore and somebody sat in, and the material could be the best quality material in the world. To use that material of the pants for the covering of Sefer Torah, but you're elevating it. But you want to know something? It's inappropriate. Inappropriate. That material that covered the person's exterior, posterior, to put on a Sefer Torah, it's unacceptable. It's inappropriate. If you understand what it's inappropriate, not acceptable. And it's a law which is cited in the Code of Laws of Shulchan Aruch. You're not permitted to do this. The body which engaged in transgressions, infractions, the mouth that ate not kosher, the mouth that spoke Lashon Hara, the mouth that said vulgarities, expressed vulgarities, that mouth should have relevance to sing God's praises in the world to come. It's inappropriate. It's more inappropriate than the pants being used as the material for the mantle of Sefer Torah. The hand that stole, the hand that violated Shabbos, the mind that was involved in who knows what, the thoughts that went through that mind. That should have relevance to God. Inappropriate. Even after it's been expunged. A very interesting law. What's the law? In the temple, they had libations. Libations. Normally libations, this is what was poured on the altar, on the Mizbeach. Throughout the libations were wine libations. On Sukkot, in addition to wine libations, there were water libations. They drew water from a wellspring, and they would pull water libations on the altar. On the corner of the altar, there were two like drains, and they would pour it down that drain. Now, what happens if you left that water exposed? And there's a question, maybe a snake had drunk from that water. Anything a snake drinks from, we're talking about a venomous snake, there's always some residue of venom left in that water or in that liquid. So if you left that water exposed, that water cannot be used for the libation any longer. Even if the water is filtered, it's filtered water, it cannot be used. Because since that water had venom in it, although the venom was filtered out and it's pure, it's no longer appropriate to be used on the altar for libations. All the evil has been expunged from the body. You're resurrected now. But the material, the makeup, it's the same. But it's not the same body. It's recreated to a different existence, something else. But that body, that have any relevance to God, the body has traces of evil. Even if you do tshuva from now forever, you can't have that relationship with God. Having that body which has traces of evil, and especially that body which was involved in some level of sin at a certain level at one time, because there's no perfect person. So that the God resurrects us to get our due reward, because whenever we accomplish in this world, it was a combination. It was a duality between the soul and the body. This is Rav Loshia. This is something which is not to be fathomed. Tremendous ability that God is willing to do this to bring us back. Tremendous ability of salvation. He's just not master eternally. But when it comes to bring about salvation, it's Rav Loshia. It's with abundance he brings that salvation. It's interesting. The last part of the Amidah is the thanks. We give thanks to God. So part of that modim, We say the wonders, the miracles. He keeps our soul intact. We give thanks for that. Although the opening blessings of the Amida are not thanks, it's just depictions of God, of his relevance to us in this existence. But still, just saying he's Rav Shia, what does that say? He's Gomel Chasudim Tovim, which was expressed in the first blessing. He does acts of loving kindness which are truly good, regardless of how we understand what they are. But the Gomel Chasudim Tovim, the first blessing that concludes the Birchas HaShachar, the concluding blessing. Gomel Chasodim Tovim Lamo Yisrael. God is the one who does acts of loving kindness which are good for his people Israel. By depicting with that, automatically, we have to give thanks immediately, even before we say thanks. Understanding that, it's something that we be so enthused and enthralled with this, we shouldn't be able to contain ourselves, because that's the reality. You know, it's very interesting. There's a very interesting human characteristic. It's called acclamation. A human being acclimates himself very easily. Maybe initially difficult, but over time, of course, there's a certain, we get used to something, we acclimate ourselves. Even the most extreme level of deprivation, for the sake of survival, a person acclimates himself. And the ultimate level of being a beneficiary of good, if there's a continuum of that good, exceptional good, you acclimate yourself and it becomes ordinary. You stop appreciating it after a while. You know, because it was yesterday, the day before, it's always been this way. It's been for the longest time. So acclamation has its positives and has its negatives. We get used to things. We take it for granted. Person succeeds every day, he does that exceptional deal. He has all the tombstones on his desk, and he has that big plaque up on his door. CEO of what? New York Transit System. Okay, that's the CEO of what? And it's all the tombstones of all the taxpayers that paid for all that cover that debt. Okay, that's what it is. When you say the Amida, we say Gomel Chasodim Tovim. This is a renewal of reality. In every moment, God is able to cease willing whatever is happening at that moment. When I give you a gift, once I part with that gift and give it to you, it's yours, it's not mine any longer. God, every moment you have anything, or we have anything, at any moment, it can be terminated, because the only reason why you have it, whether it's our life, it's our function, it's our possession, is because God continuously wills that reality. So there's no such thing as acclamation. Every moment, because it's machadish tu v'chol yom t'masev reishis, it's an ongoing renewal of existence. Machadish v'tuvo, with his goodness, he renews creation. Every moment is a new moment. Therefore, we have to realize there's no acclamation here. What you have this moment, next moment's a new moment. And the moment that preceded this moment was not this moment. Therefore, as a result of that, reflecting on this and thinking about that, you have a different understanding of what God is. And we being the beneficiaries of whatever he wills and whatever he does. The ultimate is resurrection. That's the ultimate expression of reward and punishment. That even the body that has all the traces of embedment of that original evil, even that, God, even after it decomposes, God is agreeable and wants to show that he pays what one deserves to resurrect that body to be a beneficiary of the ultimate relationship which a soul has prior to the reinfusion of the soul.